Good evening, everyone in Alberta, Canada, and beyond. It is Wednesday, February 14th, and I'm Kerry Lambert, and I welcome you to an online webinar, Evening of Solutions for New Alberta, brought to you by the Alberta Prosperity Project, also known as APP. It's February 14th, it's Valentine's Day, and here I am working the webinar. Well, I'm working the webinar, and you're watching the webinar, so what does that mean about us? It's just one of those things that, you know what, if it falls on a Wednesday, it falls on a Wednesday. So there's nothing we can do about that. We want to keep consistent, so that's why we're doing it. Alberta Prosperity Project's purpose is to educate, inspire, and unite all Albertans, businesses, and organizations to protect their prosperity, individual freedoms, rights, and sovereignty by empowering the Alberta government to restructure Alberta's relationship with Canada. Of course, we couldn't do this without your help. If you can, please share this webinar. And likewise, we did this last week. If you can just put in the comments where you're watching from and ideally what platform you're watching, if you're watching from Rumble or if you're watching YouTube, that sort of thing, it gives us an idea of what's going on. And, I mentioned about Valentine's Day already. So normally we have about 300 viewers right now. We have 102. So that just shows everybody's out having steak dinner, steak and lobster. I know that's exactly what Chris Scott's going to be doing right now. He was slated to come on and talk with us about what's happening with APP, as well as to engage with our guest. And unfortunately, he will not be joining us. So you're stuck with me and you're stuck with our guest. But it's going to be an amazing talk. So please stick around. Things I do want to bring up here is please go to the website, albertaprosperityproject.com. Our APP is membership driven with a goal of 1 million plus members to help steer the political process. APP memberships are 1 year for $20, 2 years for $30, 3 years for $40, or you can make a donation on the website as well. You can also contact us at contact@albertaprosperity.com. Let us know how you're feeling about things and get involved as well. Speaking of getting involved, yesterday, totally going off script here for a second, yesterday, we had a Calgary chapter meeting. So as amazing as it is, we're spread out all over Alberta. And we had a Calgary chapter that was set up, I guess, a year ago, maybe even 2 years ago, I guess. And things get busy. People get busy. And the people that were involved with that, Kate Graham, amazing. Thank you so much for all the work that she does. Unfortunately, she was unable to continue on with that. She's taken on a bunch of other stuff. She does our weekly newsletter. So hopefully you guys enjoy the newsletter and the stuff that's going on with that. And it came down to, you know what? Calgary and Edmonton, but let's say specifically Calgary, because I am in Calgary. Believe it or not, I actually don't live at the Whistle Stop in near Alberta. I actually live in Calgary. And because of that, we were looking at the numbers and how to get people engaged. And Calgary has almost 1/3 the population of the entire province of Alberta. So we need to get people involved in Calgary. And so we had our first official meeting again, version 2.0, if you want to call it that. And I don't know how many people there were, probably 15, 20 people there anyways. And a great start of conversation, getting people involved. And again, we always say that if you guys can get involved, please get involved. We're going to just briefly talk about the events. If you go to the Alberta Prosperity Project again.com, you can look at the events page. We didn't have that particular chapter meeting set up on our events page, but I know going forward we will. And we actually want to have regions in Calgary, as well as, of course, everywhere around the province. So if you go onto the events page here, I'm going to see if I can just zoom it up. It tells you a little bit what's going on. We've got our events. We've got a start to a sovereignty, the pension plan event that's going on in Caroline this Saturday, the 17th. And then we've also got one on next Wednesday, the 21st, in Calgary, and it's at the Riviera Hotel. And if you're keeping track on the calendar, you'll notice that Wednesday is the 21st, which means what are we doing for a webinar? I'll be talking about a little bit more about that. But Nadine Wellwood, as well as Tanner Naday, are speaking with us about the Alberta Pension Plan. They will be live, believe it or not, live at the Riviera in Calgary on the 21st. However, we're getting Nadine in tomorrow to to pre-record a webinar that we're going to be showing on the 21st. It's scheduled. That's just kind of the way it works out. So, but Chris will be the one that's hosting the webinar next week. I'll be at the Riviera with Nadine live. But if you can make it down to Calgary to do that, then by all means, please show up from the webinar. We'll be talking about the pension plan. Nadine's done a great job discussing lots of charts, lots of things, talking about the pros of an APP or Alberta pension plan, and some of the cons, although I have yet to actually know of any cons, I guess, in theory. So she's going to be going through that, and we'll be talking about what's actually happening with the Canada pension plan. So by all means, please do check out our events page and find out a little bit more about what's going on in the Alberta Prosperity Project. And yeah, I think I've rattled it on a little bit long. We're going to get our guest on here. Tonight's episode is called The Anniversary of the Emergencies Act, and that was just a really big umbrella. But there's so much to talk about that deals with that. And we were welcoming Roy Beyer, who's obviously no stranger to being on our webinars. He's a former pastor and a political activist now, advocate, and he's co-founder of Taking Back Our Freedoms, as well as he's been on talking about the education of the UCP AGM back in November. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. We've got, if you're kind of keeping track of what's going on after the Emergencies Act, I think it's actually a little too difficult to talk about, or too much stuff to talk about. We got what happened in Coutts, what actually happened in terms of Ottawa. We talked about, what kind of anniversary ideas that are going out. There's events tomorrow. We're going to be talking about that as well. And then we also want to talk a little bit about, hey, so we brought up the whole anniversary. What is happening in local government now, and what can we do in Alberta? And we're going to be talking a little bit about the AGM motions that have been passed at the UCP AGM in November. So with that, I'm now going to bring Roy on. How you doing, Roy?
The camera's working. So
we had a little bit of technical issue. We always
I had to change the browser, and it works now. So I'm glad I was able to get on. But good to be with you tonight, Kerry.
That's great. So I noticed on your little page, or your little name right there, it says Roy Beyer, forjustice.ca. What is that about? Maybe that's a good kind of way. I mean, we could start from the beginning and talk about the Convoy and Emergencies Act, but I want to jump into this first, and then maybe we'll backpedal a bit. So tell us a little bit about For Justice.
It's my primary current project right now, and it's just a few months ago I was made more and more aware of what these four gentlemen from Coutts, still in prison, were enduring, and I did a little bit of research to find out how inconsistent it was, what they were experiencing in terms of time in jail. You can see that an awful lot of time, that it currently 731 days for Anthony and for Christopher. About a week ago, Jerry and other Christopher Lysek were released on basically a plea deal, which we can talk about. But I looked at these four gentlemen and I said, okay, there's a serious allegation against them, which I don't believe because of who came up with the charges. But this is why people said, well, they must have done something wrong. But the problem is, in Canada, the typical rules around bail are, even if you did something really bad, repeat violent offenders who committed a police murder in Winnipeg, for example, is released on bail. That's just routine. I mean, you've got examples. I mean, I think the leader Pierre Poilievre mentions how that the top 40 offenders in Vancouver have committed 6,000 crimes, repeat violent offenders. And that's the norm in Canada. The other extreme for political enemies of the Prime Minister, and to be honest, at the time, Jason Kenney was premier here, and there was some shenanigans with the Justice Department here, but something very odd took place towards these four and towards all the other truckers, by the way, Freedom Convoy truckers that have been charged. I mean, Tamara and Chris are being charged with mischief, but they're being threatened with 5 to 10 years in jail for mischief.
That's right. That's right.
That should startle you, and that's typical of what about 10 others are experiencing that were in Ottawa. And that's typical of about what another 8, I think it is, in from Coutts are experiencing mischief charge with a threat of 10 years in jail. And these 4, I mean, they probably want to throw them away for life, right? That's probably what they're up to. I discovered that a special prosecutor was appointed to go after these individuals from the Coutts convoy, which is not normal. Special prosecutors are used to go after corporate entities and international crimes. These guys are citizens of Canada. So there's this very heavy-handed attack against these individuals. And I realized that so many people in the freedom movement, grassroots Albertans, are not aware of this detail. And so we launched an awareness campaign, and our website is forjustice.ca. Awesome. And you can read the essential information about these 4 gentlemen. Yeah. And I think it's just really important for more and more Canadians to know what's happening. The first piece of this was for us to get our brochure into the hands of Tucker Carlson. Mm-hmm. And of course, he brought this up here when he was here in Alberta. And we handed out over 30,000 brochures across the province. We ran out. But you can download a printable version of this brochure. So you can print. Hopefully, a lot of these are going to be handed out at the courthouse events across Canada that are happening tomorrow. So for me, I just decided public information campaign, big time. Let the world know how wrong this is. Yeah. And now this is beginning to be known, not just across Canada, but across the world.
That's right. And you know, we're not going to take too much time in rehashing the story about the boys, because it's been everywhere. I mean, there's Jason Levine's had on their show, Shadow David. You've been on with James Soleil. I mean, we've kind of been telling the story out there, which is great, because I mean, if you don't know what's going on with the guys from Coutts now, give your head a shake or wake up or just do a hashtag Coutts4. That's all you need to do to find out their story. It's such a compelling story, and especially now that 2 have been released. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that, maybe, Roy?
Yeah, just before I make that point, just the thing, I know that we're preaching to the choir with your audience, but we produced the brochure so that people can take these brochures and hand them out to neighbors. We have people handing them out to RCMP officers at the RCMP station. Just putting it in the hands of people who need to know. We need to widen the circle of people that know about this. So that's really what the brochure is all about. But the interesting, and was a shock that last week we had the announcement of 2 of these gentlemen on a plea deal. And basically a plea deal is interesting, because what they pled guilty to in order to get out of jail was a crime that neither one of them were charged with. Okay. So for example, the one individual was charged with illegal transportation of a weapon. But he was never actually charged with illegal transportation of a weapon. So how this works, so you understand, you have an extremely serious charge against you, conspiracy to commit murder, and they don't have a lot of evidence. So they start negotiating with you. Say, well, we'll let you off, but you have to admit to something. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So they creatively come up with something that you admit to. And I know for a fact that this person that admitted to a illegal transportation of a weapon did not actually have a weapon in his vehicle, but he had to come up with something. There was apparently a verbal discussion somewhere that he would do it for someone, right? So this is what happens. These guys are under the stress, alternatively, of going to a full trial, and if the jury finds him guilty, which we think it's not going to happen, but so many people have already decided what they think before the court even starts, right? And they can find themselves 20, 30 years in jail. And so, of course, 2 of them felt, okay, the plea deal made sense for them. And the other one was the illegal storage of a weapon, which probably 100,000 Albertans right now currently guilty of doing that. So it's a relatively minor charge. And it meant that they're out, time having been served. And so they served the equivalent of 3 years in jail for those two very minor crimes.
Yeah, yeah. And I know a question is being brought up. So now that they've pled guilty, what does that mean? They've got a criminal record. They can't travel to the U.S. All those things that come encased with that.
Exactly. I mean, there's so much limitation. Apparently, they can still travel to Mexico, I'm told. I don't know that for sure, but not to the States.
Yeah.
Many countries would be not allowing them to travel. They carry that over their heads. But remember, there's others that have gone before us: Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King, and I can go through a long list of people who spent time in jail and standing up for what was right, falsely accused. And so we need to help these individuals. They're spending time alone with their family, but soon maybe be able to really be welcomed as heroes the way we should welcome them. I mean, I know that one individual quite well in terms of his background, and there's nothing that even closely resembles lifting a hair against an RCMP officer. This was just a vulgar, false accusation against these guys, and so we have to help them to recover. And this will hang over their heads. There'll be consequence for the rest of their life. But again, they can still be viewed by more and more Canadians as heroes, as they truly are.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up right at the front because that is the part that I know a lot of people wanted to see right away, and it's something that will get people engaged in the rest of the conversation here. We brought people into the webinar talking about the Emergencies Act and what happened with that. Now, you and I both were in Ottawa. We ended up going out, and as it so happened, Chris, Jess, and I were driving back on the 14th, the Monday the 14th. And Monday the 14th. And of course, we had to get back to Alberta fairly quick. And we heard what was going on in Ottawa and as well as in Coutts on that particular drive. And I think we were passing through North Bay or maybe we were in I think it's called Cochrane, Ontario at the time. And were you still in Ottawa when the Emergencies Act was declared?
Yeah, I was. I was actually still in Ottawa 8 days after. So
you were okay.
Inordinate time in Ottawa.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll never forget the day the Emergency Measures Act was declared. I think it was just a few hours before I started seeing images from the arrest of 4 individuals. No, it's actually 13 individuals they were talking about involved with the illegal gun seizure in Coutts. So this was a big story, the conspiracy to commit murder that happened within hours of the declaration of the Emergency Measures Act. And in my mind, it's very suspicious that this happened the way it did, because it's not normal that the RCMP would take a photograph of their evidence and tell the world what their evidence is within hours of an arrest. They don't do that. They just never do that. But in this case, they did the Prime Minister a huge favor, took a photograph of these weapons and apparently a patch of some group called Diagolon, which is pretty funny, actually, once you understand what that is. But that story became the impetus, the excuse for the imposition of the Emergency Measures Act, which, as we know, has recently been declared unconstitutional, illegal.
That's right.
That all of these things tie in a very interesting fashion. This Emergency Measures Act should never have happened. Most of us know that. The common sense dictates. But it was the Coutts events that became the excuse. And ironically, it was just a week or two before these 2 individuals were released that the court ruling came out to declare the Emergency Measures Act as unconstitutional.
Yeah. I don't know. Have you actually, something I did prepping for this today, have you actually done a search lately? Like for me, it was today, but have you done a search lately online to see what they're saying about the timeline for the convoy and the Emergency Measures Act and who was involved and all that?
I haven't. I have done enough searches recently to know that we're being manipulated.
We're absolutely manipulated a great deal. Absolutely. So here, I just want to show you. the good old Wikipedia. Now, if you don't know anything about Wikipedia, people use it as a dictionary and they think that it's the law. Like obviously, people smarter than all of us have gone in and they put all this. No, this is like a page on the internet that anyone can edit. So if you want to go in and edit a Wikipedia page, by all means, have at her. The issue is then someone's probably going to come in and correct those edits. So the reason I brought that up is because here is a timeline there's 2 pages in particular, timeline of the Canada convoy protest. And it goes through, what happened prior. And then it lists off the actual dates, what ended up happening. And then it briefly says, where are we? 14th. It says, distributed denial of secrets. DDoS began distributing a list of Freedom Convoy's gifts and go anonymous donors. And then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act to end border blockades and the occupation of downtown Ottawa by so-called Freedom Convoy protester. That's it. That's all it really says about it. And then you go through, and nowhere in here, the aftermath, there should be something right in here, within the last couple of weeks that says it's illegal. And yet there's not to be found. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, convenient omission, right? So
yeah,
the other thing that's very, very interesting in that is that it's not true that the border was being blocked at Coutts at the time of the declaration of the Emergency Measures Act. That's not true. Absolutely. That's a lie.
Yeah.
That border was, in the first place, part of the challenge when the truckers decided to open lanes both ways. After talking to the RCMP, there was blockades set up by the police that made it a very difficult challenge to get the trucks out of the way. Same thing happened in Ottawa. The blockades in downtown Ottawa literally guaranteed the streets would be blocked. Then they blamed the truckers, and it took a couple days for the lanes to be open so that the emergency vehicles can go through and everything else. But within 2 or 3 days in Ottawa, the lanes were all open. There was no issues as far as getting to anywhere you needed to go in Ottawa. And within, I think, 3 or 4 days, the border was open in Coutts. That's the truth. And the lie is, of course, what you read on Wikipedia. So
exactly.
So predictable. Yeah.
And it is funny how it's gone through that. And again, just to kind of give you an idea of what else there is, there's a couple of pages. There's one that's what's happened with the Canada convoy protest, why we were doing it, blah, blah, blah. Go through it. It's actually kind of looking at it now. And this was probably posted like immediately, and they would just grew, right? So you look at it then, and you're kind of going, oh, well, maybe they shouldn't have been in Ottawa. Maybe they shouldn't have been in Coutts. But when you look at it now, and you look at what the knowledge that we have now, and it's basically stayed where it is, it's like going back in time to see what they had talked about back then, and it's all garbage. I think so. 100%. I'm not going to get into it, but I advise our viewers to, if you've got some time, go ahead and take a look at that, as well as you can even go back and see what CBC said about it.
Yeah, and again, I think you probably mentioned to your audience many times that in Ottawa, I think it was within 5 or 6 days that the citizens that had taken the Ottawa convoy to court to try to get them kicked out of the city. The court ruling, this is the Ontario Superior Court, ruled that the convoy in Ottawa was lawful and peaceful, except they needed to stop honking the horns, right?
And so we did. By that Monday, we'd stopped
100%. They stopped honking the horns. It was lawful and peaceful. If you're going to be in Ottawa as a resident, you need to always remember that that's the capital city of all Canadians. And so we do have the right to come there and celebrate or protest, as the case may be. That's and if you don't like that, quit your whining and move somewhere else, right? So, but anyway, it's, those of us who were there know that the reality of the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa versus what was reported on the media was 100% opposite. Could not be more different. It was no more of a blatant lies that we saw on mainstream media than I've ever seen with anything in my life. So we experienced it, but that's what we were up against, is a media that fully supported the Prime Minister and his corruption. and it was frustrating. But at the same time, it changed everything. The Freedom Convoy changed everything. They could not put the genie back in the bottle. People experienced hope across Canada, and big things started to happen,
and across the world too. And that's
across the world.
The Emergencies Act kind of, will I say, it solidified this whole event in history. Because again, everybody in the world, we had you name it, farmers in the Netherlands, which of course followed that. We had people following us from South Africa and from Chile, and like you named the four corners of the earth. They were watching us, and now they've actually used that for their own protests. So they had the farmers out with their tractors in the Netherlands. That's going on right now in Germany as well, because they realized that what the convoy did was it made look at us, and how can you not? And so whenever people ask me about, so do you really think it did a job, and why were you doing it in the first place, I question, so if it didn't work and people were not involved and there was nothing really to get involved with, why are they still doing it in the Netherlands? Why are they still doing it in Germany? Because there is an issue, right? And I think that's important to note, that a lot of people just, they need to get involved that way, and even just look outside your own backyard. The thing I don't like about the whole C11 limitation of what we can see on social media and news, and you can still go directly to the sites. You still can go to cbc.ca and get unfiltered content or uncensored content, but you just can't repost all that stuff. The problem is that we at least certainly for me, when I was dealing with all this stuff for the last couple of years, is I went to one shop, one place, because I knew I could get all my news source on that. Now the government has said, no, that's not allowed. You're not allowed to go and do that. So now I've got 100 tabs open on my browser every day in order to look up the news. And one of the things that I really notice is even the news coming in from other countries is filtered, right? Stuff that you would think that you'd be able to find out about the States, maybe what's going on other than the Super Bowl. If you could just find out what's going on politically, or maybe, what's happening with the weather or anything like that, it takes a little bit of digging to do that. And I think that's totally by design. They've made it so that we don't have as much access to the news that we did before. And
absolutely. We have tyrannical leadership, just a dictatorial mind, and it's going to get worse and worse until we finally get rid of Trudeau. But in the meantime, what we need to realize, again, going back to the Freedom Convoy, an effective protest, and why they hate the Freedom Convoy so much, is it was the most effective protest probably in the history of Canada, one of the most effective in the world. It shifts public opinion. Because my political background, I was very well connected with people in Ottawa. And as the Freedom Convoy was traveling across, and not even having arrived to Ottawa, public opinion shifted from 35 to 45 to 55% in support of the Freedom Convoy demand for the end of mandates. And the political establishment in Ottawa was freaked out. They were just absolutely freaked out. The two big parties responded in two different ways. The Conservative Party pushed Aaron O'Toole out as leader. Internally, it was because they disagreed with how Aaron O'Toole was not supportive of the Freedom Convoy. And of course, the Liberals went the other way. They hired, it was actually the city of Ottawa, hired a public relations firm that specializes in smearing the character of their political opponents. But they treated the convoy as political opponents, and they put out lies about the convoy. They're Nazis. They're burning down apartments. They're eating food in food kitchens.
Right. You were right.
All purposeful, hired by the hired guns of the city of Ottawa to push out a lie. But the fact is, as I said, the genie was out of the bottle. The Freedom Convoy had an impact that impacted the world. And as tragic as the events were with the Emergency Measures Act, even that we've been now vindicated with the court ruling. It was illegal. It was unconstitutional. And all of our Freedom Convoy heroes can hold their head high for the courage that they had.
That's right. And something that just happened today, and you probably know about it as well, is there was the group. I want to get this up if I possibly can. Just give me a second to zoom in on it. I don't know if you've seen though. I guess I can't zoom in on this the way. Basically, they're suing the group that includes Tamara and Tom Marazzo, Chris Barber, anybody that had their bank accounts frozen are now being or are suing Justin Trudeau, etc. And so what I wanted to do is actually zoom in on this and show you what who was on there. I'm not sure. Maybe I can do it this way. No, I don't think I can.
Yeah, that's new news, and that's fantastic news.
Yeah, that's
right? I mean,
absolutely. And you know what? So every day there's something new, which is amazing, right? And it's we should be doing daily webinars. We should be doing daily podcasts. And you know what? There's so many people out there that are doing webinars or podcasts, I should say. And I think that is absolutely amazing. I think if anything, this is now the people's news channel. This is where they go and they learn about what's going on behind the stories. We're the W5. We're the W7.
Yeah, no, it's there. Like I said, there's a string of good things that are happening, especially here in Alberta. I think it's kind of the home of the strong and the free. A lot of the truckers in Ottawa, we're from Alberta, and of course the convoy in Coutts, Alberta. And the big changes politically start here in Alberta. So I believe it's the first place we're going to see a real pushback against the globalist establishment. And we have a lot of work in front of us because we let those clowns take over virtually every institution over the last 40 years. You know, we've been just sitting at home, minding our own business, going to church, going to work, and meanwhile, the corruption has set in pretty deep in our institutions. But we're seeing some big reversals here in Alberta, starting with just that UCP event, the AGM this past November. That was monumental. It was historic as well. I tied all back to the Freedom Convoy. It was that convoy that sparked a fire that led right to that event this past November. So it is very exciting times for sure.
Yeah. And there was almost 4,000 people at that AGM, or like 3,600, or I forget what the number is.
Just over 3,800. But just to understand the scale and scope, the largest AGM of any political party in the history of Canada, from what I can find, is around 2,400. So this is 3,800. It was that much bigger than any AGM in the history of Canada, federal or provincial parties. And the other thing that's significant is the pattern of the votes on policies. You know, usually you have a lot of stress and strain in the party. There's the left wingers, the right wingers, the progressives, the conservatives, and you have close votes. There was nothing close about the votes that happened there.
No, you're right.
It was a tsunami of votes against the woke agenda. That's how I describe it, a tsunami. And so it wasn't just the Freedom people that were there. It was the influence of the Freedom Party that affected the entirety of the Conservative Party. So some good things are happening. But like I said, and I think David Parker, when you have him on as guest, he always stressed, this is a continuous and never-ending improvement project. We have to remain engaged at every level of government, and really we got to flush out the corruption in every institution. It's going to take us decades to fix this problem, but it's worth it for our grandchildren, is how I say it. So
and you know, for the most part, because we talk Alberta Prosperity Project, so we talk about provincial politics and of course how that deals with federal, just like the Emergencies Act and a lot of other things that we've been kind of talking about in terms of pension plan and taxation, maybe policing. But we're also looking at the other direction too. We're looking at from the provincial, but we're looking at it municipal as well. And we're going to be getting a few guests on that are going to be talking about how to get involved in city politics and what you can do there. Because no matter what level of government there is, there's something that we can all be doing. And I don't want to get into too much detail on this, but I know, Roy, you're also involved with the group that is looking at recalling Jyoti Gondek, who is the mayor of Calgary.
Yes, and that's actually a very exciting project. I'm just going to pull up the information here. Recall Gondek is the standard for recalling a mayor is ridiculous. It's 40% of the population of the city. If we're recalling an MLA or the premier, it's 40% of eligible voters. Mm-hmm. So it ends up, when you do the math, it ends up being 63% of eligible voters in Calgary have to sign the petition for it to succeed. But we're doing this because, I don't believe it's going to take that number to force a resignation. If we get anything above 40% of eligible voters, we're going to be able to make the case that she should step down. And just because she's by far the worst mayor that we've ever seen in the city of Calgary, one of the worst in Canada, just from day one, the day after she gets elected, she announces out of the blue a multi-tens of billions of dollar commitment because of the emergency, climate emergency that she declared.
Yes. Yep.
So this was fundamentally dishonest from day one, and she's managed to offend pretty well every cultural and ethnic group, every faith group. It's just unbelievable how offensive she is in terms of how she conducts her mayorship. So it's over 74%, I believe, are opposed to Mayor Gondek. So we have this initiative happening. We've got the website. You can just write it down, recallgondekyc.com or .ca, both work. Recallgondekyc.com. And if you're a Calgarian, this is very exciting. You're going door knocking. About 70% of the people say, "Give me that." It's like, let me sign. And really? So we're going to get some great results. But that's another thing that's happening, right? We gotta fix the mess at our local governments, our school boards, and so every one of us working together, whether it's APP, TBOF, TBA, we're all the same here. We're people that care about our country, our province, and our cities. And it really starts local. We have to fix the mess right here in our own cities and our own province. Yeah. And I think Alberta is up for that challenge. Yeah.
No, and as you can tell, it's everyone needs to be involved, and the people that are not, they're sitting by and they're not doing anything and they're not engaged. That's the reason why we're in the position that we're in right now. Yeah. And I've said this many times, get involved, but I realize, people have kids and they got soccer and gymnastics or whatever you need to do. Just give whatever amount of time you can. And if that's only an hour a week, then great. If it can end up being a part-time job, then that's great too. But that's, people need to be able to give a little bit in order to solve a lot of these issues. So
I was sitting pretty comfortable even in the middle of the mandates and all the rest of the nonsense. I had a job where it doesn't affect me, and but I had to ask myself the question: the direction our country was going to, the loss of freedoms, the loss of rights, the craziness. Yeah. I can leave Canada, but my grandkids are here, right? So the future generation is here, and if you leave Canada to go to another place, this will just follow us. So we have to draw the line in the sand right here in our province and say we're going to push back against all of this agenda, the globalist agenda, and we're going to take back our rights and freedoms. And so it's happening here in Alberta. And again, I stress to everyone who's a cynic, it's going to take time. I understand. We're a long ways from where we need to be. The UCP party will be a long time to flush out the corruption. In fact, I always say it's kind of like a house with 12 kids. It'll always have to be cleaned up, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
that's the nature of it. Kerry, is that dog bothering you? Because I'm home alone. I put
don't
my
hear the
dog
dog at all.
downstairs. Can you hear him? Because I can bring him up here and get him to stop.
Do whatever you need to. I can't hear the dog. I don't know if anybody else can hear the dog out there.
Yeah, if you can't hear the dog, then it's fine. I've just it's just one of those things where anyway, he's old and grumpy, and I thought he was looked after with food, but he's barking away.
That's all right. And again, there's lots of stuff that we could be talking about. I want to get to answer some of the questions that people did talk about, because I think these could be discussion points and do an entire webinar on these as well. So Judy right off the hop asked, is Trudeau ever going to be held accountable for this, or the RCMP, or you could name off like any politician or anything like that? Well, again, with what we just saw in terms of Chris Barber, etc., launching a lawsuit, that's a good very first step. We also have Leighton Gray's got a lawsuit going, a class action against anybody that is being vaccine injured or removed from their job because of that. We also have Jeffrey Rath and company, who are doing ones that I'm personally involved with, that lost business because of that, and so I lost my bar. My jukebox and arcade games was definitely suffered a lot of financial loss of that, because if you remember back a long time ago, November 26th of 2020 to June 15th of 2021, you couldn't touch anything. You couldn't touch a game. You couldn't even touch a VLT, right? Yeah. And it just so happened that in that time, the Alberta government came out with their Play Online, or whatever it's called. I don't even know what it's called, but it's their online gaming. There's no way they would have been able to put that together within like a month or two that they did, unless they knew that this was a way that we could do that. So there's those sorts of things that, people have lost business. Again, I'm in the entertainment and musician, karaoke, disc jockey. I book a lot of those. We weren't allowed to go out of our homes. We just had to stay indoors and watch Netflix and order in from Uber Eats. So those definitely, there are people that are going to be held accountable for that, and unfortunately, it's just going to take a long, drawn-out process in order to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of people wish we had a criminal justice system that would go after these individuals with criminal charges, which should happen. But the problem is, as we mentioned earlier, our institutions have been corrupted pretty well, all of them, including the Law Society, very, very much politicized, so that they're beholden to the people in power in Ottawa. Police. I mean, you know who the chief of police takes his orders from here in Calgary? From Mayor Gondak. So you could say, well, arrest somebody. Who's going to arrest that person, right? So the problem is, yes, people should be arrested. They should be charged. But we have a corrupted police force, a corrupted justice system. And so what Brath and Leighton are doing is the best that can happen right now. And in a way, it could actually hurt some of these people in a very big way, because we're talking about, I think with Jeff Rath's lawsuit, we're talking about tens of billions of dollars that will have to be paid out if he wins that case.
That's right.
That will hurt a lot of the establishment, and that's the best we can hope for until these institutions are cleaned up. But I do want to speak about the RCMP.
Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
So one of the things in our call to action with our forjustice.ca campaign for the Coutts 4, we're calling on the premier of this province in Alberta, once these trials are complete, okay, so these things have to be wrapped up by August the 14th, 30 months after the charges are laid, you have to either be trial completed or the Jordan principle kicks in and they're released from jail. and that's the law in Canada. Okay, so
you're
we
saying
know that
you're saying that's July 14th?
no, sorry, August 14th.
August 14th.
August 14th will be the 30 months.
Okay.
So right now the premier can't do much. That's a fact. We don't have the American system in Canada. I wish we did, where governors can do pardons and some presidents and stuff. We don't have that system. But once this trial is over, the premier can launch an independent investigation into this matter to find out, for example, why was there a special prosecutor appointed? Why were these men, locked up in jail with not qualifying for bail? Looking into the RCMP connection with Ottawa, by the way, very significant connection between certain ones of the RCMP, and it's politicized, right? We know it's very political, and so an independent investigation to ascertain if there was political interference and from where it came, right? So I believe we're going to see if there was truly an independent investigation, that the RCMP is corrupted by taking orders from Ottawa. I personally have experienced this years ago in my 20s, Kerry. I will keep this story very short. I was an unlicensed rebroadcaster of a Christian broadcast undertaking in Medicine Hat, Alberta. And we did everything as by the book as we could, Department of Communication approval and approval from the satellite source. And so we opened up our station along with 4 others. And they called us the pirates. It was illegal rebroadcasting. The CRTC refused to give us approval. Our church got broke into by the RCMP in Medicine Hat, and they seized the broadcast equipment. And they asked me to come and report myself in. So I thought I was going to get arrested or something. I sat down with the police officer, and he says, "I'm so sorry." Because remember, I was Pastor Roy Beyer. Yes, quite prominent in the city. "I'm so embarrassed we had to do this. I was given orders from the top." I said, "Oh, who was that?" And this is what he tells me. Kim Campbell, the Justice Minister under Brian Mulroney. Yeah. Told me the name of a cabinet minister who gave the police the order to break into our church. So I know the politicization of the RCMP is such that we have to cut that snake head off. I'm not talking about regular RCMP officers who protect our communities. I'm talking about the connection to Ottawa. We need a provincial police force. We need to get rid of the RCMP. And by the way, the big cities already have it. Calgary does not have an RCMP. We have our own police force. Edmonton, the same thing. So we're only talking about 40% of the population of our province should have our provincial police force instead of the RCMP. I'm a big fan of that. And I think calling on Daniel to do an independent investigation will help us get to where we need to be.
Yeah. And you're right. And I know Grand Prairie is looking at doing their own police force, but it's a fine line here. We're trying to support what Daniel Smith is doing in terms of the whole, we'll call it the whole SOGI and the parental rights issue. But yet on the other hand, we're saying, you know what, this part over here, the whole justice and the Alberta health system, that needs to be cleaned up. So it is a fine line, but by all means, email, do whatever you need to do in order to get the word back to our premier, to our MLA, and again, to your municipal councils as well. Let them know what you think is good and what is bad. Sitting back and having a coffee or bitching about it over a coffee in a local coffee shop might be great for your self-esteem, but it's certainly not doing anything.
Yeah. It's interesting, a conversation. Sometimes people think that's progress. It's just interaction to exchange ideas. At a certain point, we need to be very action-oriented, very action-focused. So I always do a call to action. Whenever I talk about a problem, I always do a call to action. And the one thing I do know the Premier can do is call for an independent investigation once these trials are completed, to dig deep and find out what happened, because there's no question as to political interference. And it's every Albertan should care, because if Trudeau can target his political enemies using the justice system, remember Mulroney did the same thing against me, right? That nonsense needs to stop. It should never be that a politician can use the law enforcement agencies to go after his political enemies, and that has to be dealt with. So that's just another symptom of a corrupt justice system.
Yeah. Let's just go and look at a few more comments here. And again, we've had many of these types of things. Is not only the last question, is Trudeau ever going to be accountable for this, but questions like, is the case against Trudeau against him personally or the government, and how would that work? Do you have any idea on how, like, is it the person in political office? Because as far as I know, at least in Canada, you can't do that. It's the same thing as you can't go and sue your doctor.
The politicians are protected. You can't sue them. There has to be some very purposeful, fraudulent action on their part for there ever to be a criminal charge. Now that's an angle you can pursue, except you need a prosecutor willing to take that on, right? So, but Trudeau is vulnerable, I believe, because of some of the ownership he has in biotechnology companies. He and his family here in Canada. He's not protected on that front, right? So, I believe that there is a vulnerability where legal action can be pursued against him because of the conflict of interest. He enriched himself by promoting a vaccine that required the use of a product that it happens that his company was providing to Pfizer and Moderna, et cetera. So I see that as the only real vulnerability for going after Trudeau, where it's consequential.
Yeah,
I wish there was more. I know people are mad. I said I wish there was more, but that's the system we have. That's why I need to work hard to fix the system.
Yeah, and that's right. That's, we have to give support to our elected representatives in order to actually make the changes in the law. So, if we want something that recall, here's an example, right? So we were talking about, well, that was one of the 29 policies that went through, or was it? I have to think about that.
Yes, it was. Not this last time, but it was previously passed. Recall was a policy of the party membership. I think it was approved 3 years ago, actually.
Okay. But the issue now is that we can see in the case of municipality that we need such a large number in order to make any change that it's almost impossible to do. So one of the ideas would be can we not make a law that just makes that number smaller?
Exactly. I mean, it was bizarre because the party membership passed a motion for a policy for recall and for citizen initiative, so referendum, right? So Jason Kenney says yes to it, but he goes to BC and uses exactly the same standards for the thresholds that BC has. So they copy the legislation from the NDP government in BC, which, if you look at it, both for the referendum and for the recall, makes it virtually impossible for it ever to be used, right? So that's how cynical some of these politicians can be. They say yes, but then they slide in numbers. We say we have recall, but you'll never be able to do it, right? So we do have, well, for sure, we have a premier now who understands this issue, and they're looking to fix the Municipal Act and other things to make it much more achievable, right? You don't want to make it too easy on the one hand, but on the other hand, it can't be so unrealistic it never can be used. So that's the balancing act that's being worked on, and I think we're going to see changes in both the Recall Act, provincially and municipal, as well as the Referendum Act. Those two things, those all need to be adjusted to make them achievable for citizens.
That's right. And again, because we've got the UCP involved at least until, when is it? Another 3 years.
It's over 3 years from now. 3 years and I think 4 months or for 3 months. Yeah. So it's the countdown is on, but I mean, we've got some progress, but I think we're going to see a lot more progress when the legislative agenda is announced later this month. I think we're going to see some things that will make us happy. But it's much more complicated than most people realize to bring about some of these big changes. But we do, I believe we have a leader that wants to make those changes, and we have a membership that's supporting those changes. And we just need to keep providing positive pressure upon the establishment to make sure it all happens. So that's what that 29-29 campaign was all about. It's just to remind people what motions were passed at the AGM. They're common sense. They're things that most Albertans would support, guaranteed. Most Albertans would support those things. We need to nudge the political establishment to have the courage to move that agenda forward. And that's a separate topic, but the 29-29, which I think you guys talked about a week or two ago, is an ongoing campaign to help remind Albertans of what those 29 items are, and to remind our politicians who are elected to represent us to move forward on that agenda.
That's right. Do we actually have a list of those 29 somewhere? And
I do, but you'll have to give me a minute to find them.
And then, so, you know, we want to put pressure on the politicians in order to do that. So what happens if only 5 of them go to the ledge? What is the next step after that?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, not all of the policy items require legislation, right? So so you have to sort of understand that it's general principles of governments, oftentimes are governance that we're talking about. And some of them are complicated. Like, for example, I was looking over there because I'm trying to open up this other program. But for example, a policy motion was passed for Alberta to have its own constitution. Okay, so I have a good friend who's part of the policy committee, and he's one of us. Okay, he's on the provincial policy committee. And he said, it's going to take a little bit of time. He said, we first have to write or amend the Alberta Bill of Rights, which will take about 6 to 8 months for us to do the work to do that. Once we have the amended Alberta Bill of Rights, it will clip the power of Alberta Health Services, because that's how they were able to do what they did with the mandates. Once the amendments take place in the Alberta Bill of Rights, now all of a sudden, it's the Alberta Bill of Rights will have teeth to it, not like the Charter of Rights. Alberta Bill of Rights will have real teeth to it, that it matters. Our rights will actually matter, and it'll be difficult to violate rights in emergencies. And so they're actually looking at it very logically. Once they got the Bill of Rights, now they can work on a new constitution for the province of Alberta. So you got to understand, you can draft a motion that's 3 lines long and vote for it. The work to get it to become reality takes sometimes years, but they're started, okay? And that's the good news. There's some big progress that's starting to happen. And when that happens, we need to support our leaders, our MLAs, our premier. But when they drag their heels on things that are important, we need to remind them. And that's always essential, that we don't give up on these things. So there's some progress. We'll see the details, some of that progress with the announcement of the legislative agenda, and then we'll know where we need to put some added pressure. Parents' Bill of Rights requires us right now to speak up in support of the premier and where the government is going with that. Once we see the detail of that legislation, there's going to be some things we don't like, and we might have to push for some amendments. But there's progress on that very important piece of legislation. So kudos to the premier, but other things that's going to require some positive pressure to keep on being applied, because it's always oftentimes in the political streams, they look for the path of least resistance. What's the easiest path? And we just have to make sure that our vote is never taken for granted, that we are there for good governance, and we will be critical of bad governance. And that's something we need to be committed to as grassroots Albertans.
Somebody was asking, and this is a question that I've heard many other people ask too, or something similar. Marilyn says, can the NDP stop the legislation change to recall and citizen initiative thresholds, much as what we're talking about for Alberta Prosperity Project? I'm going to say no, and the reason is because it's really in the hands of the majority government. Now, the downside was and I was looking up exactly how many seats we have. The UCP has 48, and the NDP has 38. Now, if for some reason there was something that was really controversial, and maybe there were 5 people on the UCP government that went on the other side. Maybe there were a couple of people that didn't want to vote on that particular topic. Yeah, it's possible that the NDP could put a bit of a stop to something.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit, it's close. It makes it more difficult for the premier for sure. But the premier, which is again a good thing. Jason Kenney was, and I knew Jason for decades, so pains me to say, but he became a very top-down type of leader, which means he decided what would happen. He more or less told everyone how things would be. So that top-down leadership style is the opposite of Ralph Klein, and by the way, the opposite of Danielle Smith, as I understand it from people that are in caucus, that she's a consensus decision maker, which means she allows everyone to provide feedback on what they're thinking to do, and if they don't have comfort, they'll rethink the strategy and then come back. It takes a little longer to do things that way, but I remember, Ralph Klein was that type of person. He allowed there to be differences of opinion within his caucus, and he made decisions by consensus of the caucus. The opinion of his MLAs mattered to him, and it matters to Danielle Smith as well. So I like that about her, but it means sometimes that what she really wants to do today, she has to wait until a consensus develops for them to move ahead. And, I think that's still a better style of governance than a dictatorship.
Yeah. I'm putting this question up, and then I'm going to jump to something else. So Gerald says, some people claim that Smith has no say in the Coutts charges, including Smith herself, and others say she can include herself in this case. Now, Leighton Gray did a very long podcast on this particular topic, and he's also criticized Danielle Smith as well. But really, it comes down to you need the backing by the people. And people need to be aware of what is going on here. And what I want to do is maybe we'll just quickly talk about what's happening tomorrow, because this is one way that people can actually get some knowledge out there, right? So they're tomorrow in front of a lot of courthouses, not only in Alberta, but also in BC, I believe in Ontario. They're basically it's not a fundraiser or anything like that. It's just a protest. I'm sure there'll be people speaking, but it's more just let's get numbers out there and have conversations about specifically the 2 that are still in jail, but as well as talking about what happened with the 2 who had to sign off, and they've still got legal bills. People will think that, they're out of jail, so everything is all good. They've got legal bills. They've got their own personal loans that maybe they've taken in order to continue their business and their life while they're still incarcerated. So we really just want to get people out there and aware of what's going on. And I'll be at the Calgary courthouse tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. But there's also, as you can read on this, Camrose, Fort St. John, Kamloops, Kelowna, Courtenay, Edmonton, Lethbridge, London, Ontario, Ottawa, Orangeville, Penticton, St. George, or Prince George, St. Catherine, Vancouver, Toronto, Vernon, Windsor, and Winnipeg. That is amazing.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It used to just be in Lethbridge, the Lethbridge courthouse. Now look at it. It's all across, it is technically across Canada.
Yes, and this gentleman that organized it from Kelowna, he doesn't even want his name to be mentioned. He says, I just want to help these 4. I want there to be an awareness about what these guys are going through. So he has a great call to action, and you can see on the card. I'm going to be there tomorrow as well, Kerry, so that's great in Calgary. Yeah. But the point here again is the public needs to know. And so we're going to be handing out the brochure. We're going to be talking to people there and making people aware. It's not those of us on this program that they need to know. You already know.
Yeah.
We need to get out there and
Right.
in places where we can spread the word to others. And so, this protest in front of courthouses is a mechanism by which we were able to do that. And so I encourage, if you're in Edmonton, Lethbridge, or Calgary here in Alberta, those are the places that have these courthouse events. Was there anywhere else? Did you say Red Deer?
I didn't see Red Deer on here. No.
Okay. So I think it's Calgary, Lethbridge, and Edmonton. But yeah, it's a pretty
Camrose
impressive list.
in yeah, I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure Lethbridge will be quite busy as well. And then the court resumes for the other two, Chris Carbert and Tony Olenek, next Tuesday, the 20th, doesn't it?
That's right. Yeah, and they face the challenge of again, retaining the best lawyers possible.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of money. So if everyone just throws in some money into their Give, Send, Go funds, we don't use GoFundMe, Give, Send, Go.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say we, they all use the Give, Send, Go platform, and they need the help. And we're trying to figure out a way to really light up the phones for these guys, because I know that Chris Lysak was able to, through a special campaign, raise about $160,000. He got himself a really good lawyer, and you see the result, right? He got himself a really good deal for release, and charges dropped. The other two don't want a really good deal. They want to fight in court to prove themselves innocent of the charges, but that's going to cost a lot of money. And so we need to spread the word, because it means that other people can help with that. If it's just the small circle of us always donating, after a while we don't have the means to do more. But if we spread the word, like is happening right now across Canada, these individuals are going to get support from all across Canada by way of this effort that was launched by this gentleman from Kelowna.
That's right. And of course, you can't forget about James Sowery too. That money is in there as well. He's the one that was accused, convicted of running over a pylon. So don't run over pylons. If there's anything we've learned.
Anyway, it's that particular situation. It was a jury that found him guilty. It was the judge that sentenced him to nine months in jail or whatever it was. So you could see that in Canada, the juries are oftentimes steered a certain way by the judge. In this case, I'm told that's exactly what happened, that the judge was very, very forceful on the jury to more or less say, you pretty well need to know that this guy is guilty, right? And but it's up to you, but I can overturn the decision, by the way. And so, people who listened to his instruction to the jury said it was all but, telling them how they should make a decision. Now, if that's the case, that too is terrible. But the fact that he gave 9 months in jail for that, that just tells you again that you hope and pray that the current judge that the other two have is going to be one of those good judges. He was appointed by the Conservatives, so there's a good reason to believe that we have a fair-minded judge in the case for the other two, Tony and Chris Carbert, that are going to be facing a full trial starting in May.
And then, of course, we were talking about, so how do we get involved? And we kind of mentioned about the RCMP and that we should be looking into that and doing an investigation as well. I know Vicky has also been working on a couple of things through AHS, Child and Family Services, police services, including our own city police, government services. So no matter what, I think we really need to be looking at kind of the whole big picture. There's definitely some if people are able to get involved, by all means get involved and see what is happening in any government, anything that's set up through government really is kind of school trustees as well, right? There's some allegations of what's going on there. And that's a whole other webinar altogether. There's a lot of stuff, and I think it's just a matter of people need to be made aware of it. And then if they're made aware of it, then you'll get the people with the the pitchforks, and a good way of doing this is the protest tomorrow for the Coutts boys, and getting people aware of what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I want to urge everyone. A call to action that everyone can do is go to our website, forjustice.ca. If you can't get to the courthouse events, you can do things like write a letter to the
Yes.
two that are still in prison.
Yep.
You can donate money. You
Yep.
can pray for them. You can print off brochures to pass out to your neighbors who maybe need to give their head a shake and wake up to what's going on. It's done in a way that is meant to be handed out to people that are against the Coutts fort, but when they read this, they find out stuff that they didn't know.
You're right.
Yeah, it's really designed to win people over to our side.
Yeah.
So kind of familiarize yourself with that as a tool to spread the word. We even have examples of people out on bail here in Calgary. We had a murder, I think it was about 6 weeks ago, of a woman, a mother of I think 2 children, by an ex-husband,
Right.
and he was out on bail, actually twice out on bail. So he had attempted rape. That was the allegation against him, against his wife, and so she was able to get a court injunction, and he was able to get out of jail on bail of $500. $500.
Wow.
I kid you not. $500 cashless bail, which means he didn't actually have to pay anything. And he got out on bail. He violated the terms of that bail, and then he was back in front of the judge. This time they really, really came down on him. $400 cashless bail the second time around. And then the next time that he confronted his wife, he killed her in front of the school where the kids were attending school. So that's the extreme of the bail system, the extreme injustice where people that should be locked up are not. And these gentlemen who've never committed a crime, never, no act of violence alleged against them, just supposedly a plan to do something. And they're locked up for now over 730 days. So we have to see that contrast, and that helps that you realize we have a corrupted justice system, and we need to start fixing it. It's going to take time, but we can do it together.
Yeah. No, we've covered quite a bit of topics, not only an Emergencies Act and what happened with that, but everything that's kind of happened in between, or to now, or at least until now. Is there anything we want to wrap up with and let people know maybe what's going on, or maybe you want to leave some last words with people that are watching?
Well, again, I think we need to celebrate the fact that something inspired our Freedom Convoy, our truckers from across Canada, to do something extraordinary that really did make a difference. And it's up to us to now take that momentum and maintain it. But it's not protest oriented; it's action oriented. Taking over school boards,
That's right.
Helping these boys get out of prison, again, helping them get a fair trial. So there's all kinds of action. Do what you can. Just do what you can, and together we can get the job done. So I think that's the big encouragement for people, is that others did some big things. I mean, imagine what a truck costs with a full load, a trailer that they pulled with them across the country, like many of them did. They did that because they were fed up with what was going on. So, I mean, if tonight or tomorrow you write a letter to the premier or your MLA, that's nothing compared to what they did. Do something, do a little bit every day.
You are correct. Yeah. And just to put that in perspective, how, thousands of trucks, and our picker truck gas bill, I believe, was $7,000 going there and back. Never mind hotel stays, and food was actually very funny because I tell the story all the time. People were throwing sandwiches in through the window. So we never, we always had food. There was, that was one thing that people were able to do, and they did. They made cookies, threw us juice boxes, you name it. So that was amazing. But if you weren't sleeping in your truck, you needed somewhere else to be sleeping. So again, for the people that did manage to donate to the truckers and even donated to us in order to get things out there, I know we ended up buying, I forget, 400 snow shovels or something like that, because if you remember, it was supposed to be like the Thursday after we got there was supposed to be this big snowstorm. So, and they weren't going to be plowing the streets. So we ended up doing a fundraising event for getting snow shovels. And then we had the truckers went out with the snow shovels and they just swept. But the thing was, is that Thursday, it didn't happen. The big snowfall didn't happen. If anything, it turned to rain, and then it just got warmer. So we don't talk too much about that because it was just one short weekend where it was about zero. Maybe it was just over zero. But the rest of the time we were there, it was definitely minus 30. And I don't think in Coutts it got warmer than like minus 20. So just
no, it was crazy. The weather was not cooperating, but the true the brave, the strong, and the free were there, and and stood firm. And it was a life-changing experience, and I believe it'll be historic for Canada as to how that impacted the direction of our country. I certainly see that for Alberta for sure. We'll see yet what happens to Canada, but Alberta is leading the way on the cause for freedom, and I'm proud to be an Albertan, that's for sure.
Absolutely proud to be an Albertan. I know we have I'm Albertan decals and pins and stickers and license plates and shirts. And so, if you can get involved, come out to one of our APP events, and you can probably pick up some of that merchandise and let yourself know that you're Albertan and that you support at least what the Alberta Prosperity Project wants to do, and get everyone involved and educate and basically, make people aware of what's going on locally, provincially, federally, and realistically worldly, right? There's a lot of topics that we talk about in terms of the World Economic Forum and those sorts of things, that and the World Health Organization, the World Health Agreement, things like the UNDRIP and the land. So we do all of these on a Wednesday. We definitely try and do these webinars every single Wednesday. There's always enough topics out here. Thank you again, Roy, for taking time out on your Wednesday and letting us know what you're involved with and how we can get involved. And with that, I'm going to let you guys know that again next week we're actually doing an interview with Nadine Wellwood. Because of her time and because of our time, it's going to be recorded, but we're going to do a live webinar with Chris next Wednesday. He'll be broadcasting that. Nadine Wellwood, if you don't know who she is, she's had a political career in Alberta and Canada in the past. She's a financial advisor, and she's discussing the pension plan. And she's actually going to be out with me next Wednesday in Calgary at the Riviera to talk about the pension plan. So if you want to know anything more about the pension plan, whether it's a good thing, bad thing, how it compares to the Canada pension plan, and more specifically, I think, what kind of opposition we've got ourselves up against, because we've got all the unions out there, the NDP, that are saying, no, we got to stick with the CPP, and if you make 2.6%, you're doing really good. No, that is dog piles of poop. That is the big thing for me is let's take a look at the numbers, find out what the numbers are, do your own numbers, crunching, and then make a decision. And then we'll talk about what the Alberta government could do in terms of how the pension plan would be presented, as well as how, does it work can you opt out? Can you, do you have to get into it? And can I do a split between the APP and the CPP? I mean, these are questions that I'm going to leave until next Wednesday, or at least until Nadine tackles them, because they are really good questions. And quite frankly, I don't know the ins and outs of it like she does. So if you're able to, Roy, it would be great to see you next Wednesday as well, if you're not too busy.
Absolutely. Tanner did a presentation here in Calgary. We had well over 350 people in the Canyon Meadows Theater. Yeah. He's a rock star. And the work that APP, Alberta Prosperity Project, is doing is so important. There's no question this is the right thing and the good thing for Albertans to have an Alberta pension plan. It's disgusting to me that the unions are trying to tell their own workers where they could make so much, they can have a much cheaper cost to their pension or a much better pension with an Alberta pension plan. They're not serving the interests of their workers. They're serving the interests of Trudeau. That's all they're doing. But yeah, go to the event or come out next week. The presentation with Nadine is fantastic, as well as the Tanner Nadine. So it was fantastic. Yeah, it's totally
and
worth going.
Yeah, and we're planning on doing 100 of these events. It may not be under the Alberta Prosperity Project banner, but we're definitely going to be supporting it. We're going to be having a table at each one. And once we get all those numbers organized, we will let people know. We'll have a schedule up, and then we're, out of 100 dates, there'll be 100 towns. So chances are we'll be very close to you at some point in the next till June. Anyways, that's that's it for a week, 25 weeks. Wow. So because we're talking about doing that maybe as a referendum, citizen initiated referendum, possibly in September-ish. So again, those are all the things that I've heard through the grapevine. They may not be 100% true, but definitely come out to the event. And again, one last thing. Thank you so much, Roy, for everything that you do. And with that, you guys have a wonderful night. Go give your significant sweetie a kiss. It's St. Patrick or St. Valentine's Day. It's St. Valentine's.
Yes, thanks, Kerry. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate the work you guys do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys next week.